All right, I am talking with Trevor Stricker today, and we're going to be discussing Mightier, which is a very cool. I almost would rather call it a project than a specific indie game. Normally, we're talking about indie games, but we kind of a bigger scope this time. So, Trevor, thank you for taking some time to talk to us and talk about this very cool thing you're doing.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah. So let's start by getting a pitch. So tell us what Mightier is, and kind of what makes it so interesting.
Mightier is video games that helps kids' mental health.
That is a to the point and great hook. So go a little bit further. So the big thing that when you started talking to me about Mightier, that captured my attention is the idea that you're creating a bio-responsive video game. I think that's kind of the term
Yes.
that you're using.
So
So
why don't I go
tell
through
us
a
what
little
that
bit more of that?
is. Yeah.
So Mightier helps kids build emotional regulation, and it can help with symptoms like anxiety or outbursts and oppositional behavior or ADHD. And how it works is kids play video games and they wear a heart rate monitor. It's a like a watch, kind of like a Fitbit or something.
Yeah.
When the tension in the game causes their heart rate to go up, the game can sense it, and then we're jerks. We make the game more difficult. And so, to
Mightier,
keep
being
playing,
jerks to kids.
to keep playing, they have to calm themselves down. And it turns out that when somebody intentionally calms themselves down in the moment, what it's doing is it's exercising and strengthening their emotional regulation. And so what's really cool about this is to people who make games, this makes perfect sense. Uh, but there actually are people in the world. Some of them have kids, and often they like don't play games. I don't know. I've just read about them.
No definitive proof.
And so it's one thing for me, guy who's made games for a long time, to come here and say this, but we've actually done clinical research, science,
Ooh.
that shows that what we're doing can be more effective than medication.
Wow, it's really impressive to see that much of a effect from this, and it's really cool to see video games levered so much for good. But I have to ask first, kind of where this idea came from, where this whole idea of leveraging game development and games for treatment kind of awoke in you. Where did this come from?
So, to give credit where credit is due, this actually came out of the Children's Developmental Psychology Group at Boston Children's Hospital, where my business partner was a researcher in. And, they were kind of like a lot of treatments for children's mental health issues don't necessarily have issues, right? Like, there's serious problems with efficacy of a lot of mental health treatments. There's 9 mental health workers for every 100,000 people in the world, which is not a lot.
No, that's not a lot at all.
So there's an accessibility problem.
Mm-hmm.
And, they were kind of approaching this big, huge problem like, cool, so what do we do about it? And my business partner is a guy who likes playing video games, or as we like to say, totally normal. And, he started looking into, how video games can induce different states in people. And they came up with what they called rage control. Rage control, because it's an acronym for something, aggression, something, control. Oops, I should know this. Sorry, Jason, if you're watching. And basically, they had this video game as written by a scientific researcher,
Mm-hmm.
by a doctor, which was Space Invaders, I think, and it would read people's heart rates, and you couldn't fire, I think.
Oh,
And,
if your heart rate got too high.
Mhm.
Oh, cool.
And they, I'm fast forwarding a lot of parts of
Oh,
the
yeah,
story.
yeah, sure.
They tried a lot of things. Originally, they're like, maybe we should make toys. Kids like toys, right? uh, and they had this idea that what if there was biofeedback that let a person see when they were escalated, they were agitated. And they tried lots of different things. They tried galvanic skin resistance, which measures, like kind of like a lie detector
Sure.
when you're anxious, your skin sweats a little bit more. They looked into using EEGs, like reading brain waves, basically. Pupil dilation, respiration rate, and they stumbled upon what worked best was heart rate, because first of all, it's just the most well tolerated. Like you put something on your skin, it's not invasive. Anybody can do it. It doesn't have to be precisely positioned like an EEG going around your head. Also, it's highly reactive. Respiration rate can take a minute before it really reacts. Your skin can take 1 or 2 minutes until like it actually starts secreting more sweat, as opposed to your heart rate. Most people's heart rates beat somewhere between 1 and 2 hertz, or beats per minute,
Right.
Per second rather, and that's with video games things have to be fairly responsive. So something responding on the order of a second is cool. We can work with that. And then they're like, well, so what happens in the game? Does it gradually get more difficult? Does it just tell you, or do we take the game away and not let you play until you calm yourself down? And so they did this experiment, and this was an actual scientific experiment, a placebo-controlled, double-blind, randomized control trial.
The real deal.
The real deal in a clinical setting in a hospital, where kids played this version of Space Invaders, where if your heart rate went up, you couldn't fire. And what did they do for the placebo? In mental health, the placebo effect is very high. Well, this was very clever, and I can say that because I didn't make the study. They made a version of the game, and they had the kids wear the same heart rate monitor, but they didn't turn on the biofeedback. So essentially, like, you would never stop firing. And they did the study. It lasted 8 weeks. Very expensive, paying people with letters after their name to sit in the hospital and wait for, this panel of patients to come and talk to them for an hour each week. And at the end of the study, they noticed that the difference between the kids playing actual Space Invaders that got harder and the sham game that did not get harder was incredibly large.
Wow.
That the kids who played the biofeedback game saw real, measurable improvement.
That's very cool.
And there's the numbers that we have on our website are numbers that come from the study. Aggressive behaviors, oppositional behaviors went down 60%.
That's incredibly impressive.
And what's most interesting, especially I'm sure there are some people out there who watch your show who are parents, is stress at home went down almost 20%.
Wow.
Because often the acuity of a child's symptoms shows up when they go home and they take it all out on their parents. All the parents in your audience are nodding right now. And so if you help them with their symptoms, the stress at home goes down. And, it was just incredible results. So he was like, damn, let's do this.
Yeah, for sure.
It takes a lot of time to spin something out of a research lab. it took him several years. In the process, we became introduced. He showed me his game, and I did the thing that you often do when you've made games for a long time and somebody pitches their project and you're just like, my mind is figuring out constructive ways to tell him that this game he poured his intellect and intelligence and heart and soul and effort into was a steaming pile of But before I could put the words together, he's like, yeah, so clearly this isn't a game made by somebody who actually makes games. So, like, we make games.
That's actually really nice to hear, though, that they would realize that they needed to bring somebody in that knew games to make a game version of this that was going to be something effective. What is that kind of? I mean, that speaks to me that this has been a really fruitful relationship. But what has that? What has it been like working as the game developer side of this project with people that are doing the science and the medicine, and then pulling you into this kind of field that I think it's probably safe to say is not something that game developers get pulled into that often.
Yeah, so I'm very fortunate that my business partners are intelligent, thoughtful people who also, did a very grown-up thing and recognized the extent of their knowledge and their abilities. I think that's actually a rare insight. People who don't play games don't understand that games aren't just software that draws pretty pictures in response to input.
Right, yeah.
Everybody in the game industry has been approached by people to gamify corporate training or something as though all you did is just add a score, and once there's a score and achievements, people will do your crappily, poorly thought out corporate training that they don't want to do. But of course that doesn't work.
No. I think a large number of people have been exposed to that and can say it does not work.
Definitely every developer. Everybody who plays games has had the unfortunate letdown of a beautiful, well-produced AAA title that you just look at the screenshots and you're like, I want to live in that world. And then you pick it up and you're like, all right. Meh. Yeah. Next.
Yeah, right.
And I think it was what's really exciting to me is what we're essentially doing is building a game mechanic around your inner emotional state. And when we set out to build the company, we kind of realized this is hard and this is difficult. And we've got our work cut out for us with just this part of what we're building. And building games is also very hard and difficult.
For sure.
Please trust me, I've done it for 20 years. And so we made the decision that we're not going to build games. We're going to partner with game developers who've built games that we like to play. And we're going to work our mechanic into their games. And this way, when we're putting what we're doing out into the world, instead of it being the one game that we've made, it's a selection of games. It's lots of games, right? It's a
library of different games that people can play, and I think that's kind of taken an idea that is fantastic and super cool to see, and just putting a big heaping pile of icing on top of it. I mean, it's
heaping pile of icing. I like that
metaphor. It's great to see this project that in my mind could have been a fantastic tool that was very limited. There'd be 2 or 3 games, I would imagine, if it was being made in-house, that a kid could choose from to play. But now you're creating a whole different platform for people to make games for, a whole different reason for people to make games, and I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, and that's why we did it, because what's the most popular game in the world? I don't know. Right now, it's probably Fortnite.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Less than 1% of gamers play Fortnite.
Right.
So if you're building something where the appeal is, hey, you, Mr. Kid, I know you like games. Here are games.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you gave them Fortnite,
It's not going
to would be like,
right, exactly. So I have to imagine you've talked about kind of the parental side of this too, of parents being involved in this and the effect that this reductive effect on stress can have in the home life. But I have to imagine that as much as it is remarkable that the science side of this has kind of been really insightful and embraced the game development side of this project, the parental side might have been a harder sell. I can imagine if a parent came in with their kid who was having problems with anxiety and a doctor said, hey, well, you know what we could prescribe is video games. Not every parent would take that well. Has that been something you've run into? And how have you kind of dealt with that, if it has been something?
Yeah, so I think, yes.
Yeah.
I think parents tend to fit into one of two camps.
Mm-hmm.
The first are people who play games, and when we say how it works, they're like, oh, so essentially, you're intentionally stressing my kid out so they can practice recovering. Yes. And they're like, genius, we're in.
Right.
The other group of parents is exactly what you mentioned.
Yeah.
They're like, my child has frustration issues and behavior problems, and you're suggesting I give them video games?
Good day, sir. Good day.
Meet a receptive audience. There's also all this crazy talk right now that, the reason kids get violent and we have a live shooter problem is because video games. So just in that part of our society, it's like video games are just a negative from the get-go. But I think we have a number of things that help parents realize this is something that's really going to help their child and help their family.
Cool.
The first is science,
yeah,
right? My business partner is on the faculty of Harvard Medical School. This research came out of Boston Children's Hospital. There was a separate, totally independent group that replicated our findings at Massachusetts General Hospital. It's hard to argue with science because the whole point of science is it's designed to come up with persuasive data on why something is the way it is. The other thing that helps parents realize that we can help is that their kids want it. One of the really powerful things about Mightier is that it's treatment that meets kids where they are. It's a big hassle to take a child to a therapist because it's an errand to run and it takes time and it's expensive. And what kid wants to go sit down in a chair and talk to a middle-aged guy with gray hair?
Very few, I imagine.
It's just not a natural interaction.
Sure.
But what kid wants to sit down and play video games?
Almost all of them.
Right.
Right. Yeah. I think that makes perfect sense, and it's. I'm hopeful that people will see this as a way forward. Yeah. So we've kind of covered Mightier, but I also want to touch kind of on what brought you there. So kind of your background. So maybe you can tell us kind of what got you started in game development, and we did not meet when Mightier was a thing. We met back at the Boston Fig with Jungle Rumble, one of your other games. So kind of what got you started on the whole game development pathway? Big questions.
So I've made games for 20 years, but I was making games for at least 10 years before that. Just nobody was paying me to. I was, bedroom coder working in HyperCard or AppleSoft Basic or my Commodore VIC-20. And when I was a kid, it's the only thing that I could really pay attention to for long periods of time. And the only thing I ever really wanted to do with my life. Of course, in the 90s, being a video game developer was not like a career trajectory. And I figured at some point in my life I had to become a grown-up. And I guess the 19-year-old me would not realize that the 40-year-old me is still wondering when that's going to happen. But
overrated concept.
So, after school, I went to Wall Street. And I was a trader.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was fun. There's lots of numbers that go up and down, and you have lots of screens, and it's like playing a video game.
Yeah.
Except it's real. And I was living in New York City, and one day in January, very cold January day, I was walking home from this falafel place in my neighborhood, crossing 91st Street. And, when you're in Manhattan and there's tall buildings and the wind blows, it just gets funneled down, and it was so bitter cold, and I'm pulling my jacket in, and I'm like, oh man, I hate New York. And this taxi came screaming down the street, screeched to a halt right before it hit me. And I just realized at that moment that as a kid, I'd always wanted to make video games. And, I had no idea how to do that. But I also didn't have a mortgage to pay, or a wife to support, or a child to feed. And I figured if there was any window of opportunity, it was probably then. So I figured, okay, so probably the most logical thing to do is get a job before quitting.
Yeah.
My highly sought after, hard to get trading position on Wall Street. And I found out that in 1998 that was extraordinarily difficult because we didn't have these little black mirrors that we could use to get all the world's information at our fingertips. Instead, you're at an office with your office computer, and when you're a trader, you're at a trading desk, and then there's another trader right here, and there's another trader right here, and you can't leisurely peruse emails because if it's up on your screen, somebody else is like, oh, is that my client you just emailed you? Did you get that confirmation out?
Right.
And then, so we had to be pretty quick with email. And then there was no cell phone. Forget Black Mirror. There was no way to make a call. What I would have to do is get lunch for everybody on the trading desk and go down to the hotel next door and use the payphone from the lobby.
Oh my word.
And I remember once I was slated to talk to somebody at 12:30 Eastern time. So I'm like, I'm getting everybody lunch. I went down, called them right on time, and they're like, oh, he's running late. Could you just call back in 30 minutes? So I'm like, no, there is no 30 minutes. I have to, now is now. And it became clear that I could not do a proper job hunt.
Not in that environment.
No, just wouldn't work. So I quit my job. I went back to spend time with a buddy of mine who is now a grad student, and he was still at school, and I could use the computer clusters because I still had my account. And I was kind of freaked out because it's like, holy shit, I'm 22 and I just like left this thing behind, and it's a one-way exit door. Like, it's not like, hey, come back if you change your mind. No, it's like, don't let the door hit you. Like, really, you're leaving to try and do what? Like, don't let the door hit you on the way out, you silly little naive boy.
Right.
And so I had, the only way I could stay sane is making a routine out of it. So I would get up at like 8 a.m. every day, be in the computer cluster by 9, just on what existed of the World Wide Web back then, looking at career pages, trying random stuff like monster.com. and talking with everybody who would talk to me. And I would send out 100 emails and get 10 responses.
Mm.
And of those 10 responses, I would get like maybe one phone call. And it was like exciting, but it was also like really stressful because it was like a big opportunity cost for what I was trying to do.
Sure.
And I, went around, interviewed at a bunch of places, and like I was getting like just really like lame offers. Like, why did I just leave my Wall Street job to like, somebody? I remember I was interviewing at one studio in Orlando, Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and the guy, it was like such a disrespectful interview. The guy like in the middle of the day, the guy's like, I've got to do something, like, because I'm a very important businessman. Can you just come back in 2 hours? And I'm like, back in 2 hours? Like living in New York, you could be like, okay, I could go to a coffee shop, I guess, or something. But in Orlando, Florida, no. What do you want me to do? Walk a mile to the next strip mall? To like, I don't know, go to a Dick's Sporting Goods or something? But okay. So I came back 2 hours later. He's like, yeah, I think maybe you could like be the assistant to our level design programmer. Here's like a tiny amount of money, and it's like that doesn't seem like a real salary. It's like, well, in Orlando it's cheap. Like, okay. So like, if you want me to like, no insult to Orlando, it's like, I'm from where I'm from. Like, I would see this as a stepping stone and eventually like move back where I'm from, which is what I did.
Yeah.
Like, and I care about like saving money for retirement and, maybe buying a house someday. Like, this just doesn't seem like a compelling opportunity. And it was like really depressing, to be honest. And eventually found myself at Visual Concepts, who, unbeknownst to me, had just been given the development contract to work on launch titles for the Dreamcast.
Oh.
And those launch titles were NBA 2K and NFL 2K.
Sports games.
Yeah, and I'm not a sports fan, like, at all. At all. I say this from the middle of Boston, Massachusetts. You can't see this, but literally, like, through the window in this side of my office, you can see Boston Garden, where the Bruins are playing a playoff game tonight. Maybe it's the Celtics. I don't know. I'm not a sports fan.
Somebody's playing sports ball
the Celtics
somewhere.
were last night because the streets were full of people in Celtics gear.
Yeah.
So anyways, Visual Concepts, like, really difficult interview. Like, just a day of like technical problems, doing stuff on a whiteboard, people asking like really deep questions, and then like changing the assumptions. And I was like really nervous, and I thought I messed it all up. And then at the end of the day, I was sitting there with Greg Thomas, who not only founded Visual Concepts, he's also 6'6" and a short guy. And he's sitting there at his desk, and he's kind of like looking down on me. And I was like, I'm like, oh man, I've wasted my life. And he was just like, so, they said things went really well today. And I'm like, wait, heart beating. That, really? Like, it was positive? And he's like, and so I have a question. How would you feel about working on, and he paused for effect, an NFL licensed sports game? And I was like, NFL, that's the one where they do this, right? He's like, oh, you're not a football fan. I'm like, I'm not, but, open. He's like, don't worry. How would you feel about working on, pause for effect, an NBA licensed title? And I'm like, that's the one with the orange round thing that they throw in the basket. And he's like, you're not a basketball fan. And I was like, no, but, and he's like, well, would you be willing to learn? And I was like, man, if you throw me a bone, I will build you a dinosaur skeleton. And yeah, so cool. That was how I started making games.
That was your entry. Awesome.
Yes, it's only been downhill since then.
Oh no, I don't. Cool. Well, let's drawing this to a close. We always like to ask people that we're talking to about game development what projects have caught their eye. I saw you at PAX East, so you were trolling the floor, seeing all sorts of new things. Anything that stuck out to you that you're really excited to see in the future?
Two things. So the first, I like rhythm games.
Mm-hmm.
Double Kick Heroes. It's a heavy metal rhythm game where you're in this like Mad Max style tricked out car with like hellacious demons chasing you, and you have to tap to the beat to like fire crazy things at them. I might say it's the second best rhythm game ever made.
Oh, high praise.
Totally love that. Could not possibly be more excited for that. The other thing was not at PAX East. It's Make Sail.
Oh, yes.
It just went into early access. It is a sailboat construction game.
You were actually the one that introduced me to Zyba Scott, and we did an interview with him back early in the game's development. It's been really cool to watch that develop. It's gorgeous.
Oh my god. What a gorgeous thought-provoking and well thought out title. I mean, first of all, you just look at it, your jaw drops. Like, wow, video games can do this. Second of all, like, you're building a boat.
Yeah.
Like, there's a buoyancy simulation where, like, you can capsize and you have to sail it. It's like you're sailing. You have to know what direction the wind goes in, and it can blow your sail, and it's
very cool. It's very cool. It's great to finally have it like hands-on now and be able to kick the tires a little bit with it and try out different boat combinations. I can't say I've had very much success in building, bizarre boats, but
I feel that like that is one where I'm just sitting there playing with it, and my wife will be, grabbing me for dinner or because she wants me to get off my computer to watch our kids so she can go to work or something. And I'm just like, huh? What? Somebody say my name? Is there a woman in my house?
Awesome. That's two really good suggestions. Great. Well, Trevor, thank you for taking the time to talk to us about Mightier and kind of like the background of it and the design philosophy. We'll have links to the site in the description below, so people can go kind of look at some of these numbers and get a little bit more information about it. And we hope that you'll keep us in the loop on further developments with the project.
Thanks for talking to me, Jacob. As always, I love what you guys are doing at Indie Hangover.
Thank you.